right, folks, welcome back to another lore episode. I know it's been a while since we've had any sort of lore episode because I've missed a couple Thursdays in a row. And this one isn't on a Thursday because one of the players and also one of the other DMs on this channel, Luke, has obligations that he fulfills on a Thursday night. So
gotta make that money.
Gotta make that money, exactly. So he said yes to coming over on a Wednesday so we could get this out to you guys. And then eventually we'll filter through and get to our last player of Arcana of Alsteria. And then we'll move on to Luke's characters in his campaign and get through that. But for that right now, for Arcana of Alsteria, we have Sir Ben, which is played by Luke.
Yeah.
You want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay. So Sir Ben is a knight. He is a paladin warlock. He is from Alara, the Shining City, which is home to most of the human race on this continent. And he worships Twilight, one of the four gods. Twilight is also the god worshipped by the High Elves, who are the ones trying to purge the world. So it's kind of a weird dichotomy where he's like fighting against the High Elves, but also worshiping the same god as them. And then through his time, like seeing war and battle, he's been reached out to by a lesser god known as the Red Knight. And so she grants him his warlock powers. She's the goddess of battle strategy, war and battle strategy and battle wisdom. So he's a character that's all about planning and thinking and not taking necessarily rash actions, but trying to plan ahead and seek every advantage he can.
Definitely. So you jumped right into it to get go. I was mostly just going to say, what's your name? You're Luke and all that type of stuff. But you jumped into it, and I'll say, fantastically, you have a good recall. And it's probably because you DM so often, but you have a good recall of the lore of the world. So it's great for an episode like this because Luke is correct. Ben does come from Alara, which is, like he said,
the Shining City,
capital of men. So... which is important as the campaign is progressing because we're kind of ultimately getting over towards Alara kind of for at least we'll be entering the last bits of part 2, I think, as we get to the city. So before I get too distracted, because I always do on this, because there's stuff like I want to make sure you're engaged with hooks and stuff in the game, and I was just about to announce a hook, but we'll get to that. So let's start off with inspirations for Sir Ben. What made you, and we'll talk about the class later, but just Sir Ben, when you were creating the background story for a character, what were you kind of aiming for?
Very obviously, I think most people can pick up on it. I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I got my Anakin Skywalker The Eras Tour shirt on right now.
Does.
I love Star Wars. Obi-Wan has always been one of my favorite characters, and so the character is very much modeled after Obi-Wan, in just the attitude that he has of like being wise and thinking things ahead, but also just being very powerful and not trying to exert that overly on people, but very defensive in that set.
Much like his lightsaber form.
And so he that was kind of the inspiration for the idea of him, and so I just adopted the name and look as well.
Which we do have broadcasting rotating from some of the art that you sent me. So streamers can see kind of close to what you were looking for. Which, Obi-Wan.
Yeah, Obi-Wan. Definitely very Clone Wars-esque. The name comes from Obi-Wan as well, Ben Kryze. So Ben being old Ben, Ben Kenobi. And Kryze, for those who haven't watched the Clone Wars,
Spoilers.
Yeah, sort of. It's been so long now.
It has been.
There's a character that Obi-Wan has this kind of love interest with, essentially his Padme.
Yes.
That he's a little bit more devoted to the Order and more in control of his feelings, so it never worked out.
Right.
But her name was Satine Kryze. She's the Duchess of Mandalore. And so they introduce the character later on in the series, and they have this whole love interest, and so that's where the last name comes in from.
Yes.
Is
I think
Kryze.
that's actually because we didn't have the art like out of the gate, and I didn't actually pick up inspiration for the naming convention and stuff until it took a while because I think I was just looking through your profile like on to check, and because I do as a DM, and I feel like most DMs, it's probably wise to check into your players sheets every once in a while just to see if they've either been slacking or they're doing something extra or whatever it is. So but that I was in yours and making sure the health was appropriate for mine, because that's important for me for when I build encounters. So I was like, oh, Kryze, I think he's fashioned this after an Obi-Wan Satine type.
Very much.
So, okay. Awesome background. I'm a huge nerd too. It's probably hard to see on stream, but or Star Wars nerd, but I've got actually a Kryze is up there too. So, just the sister. So anyhow, with that, when we first sat down and we were moving away from campaign 1, and I knew you were going to be one of the additional players for campaign 2, and that you're going to stick in town. I can't remember what you were looking at, like 3 different classes at the time.
Yeah, I had an initial idea for a character that I really wanted, but it didn't work thematically with the world.
Okay.
Like, the time period didn't quite make sense.
Right, because you were thinking like a rifle type.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so initially, my first character that I wanted to play was actually a female, and it was a female half-orc, basically pirate captain. So it was the sharpshooter martial class. But you were talking about that gunpowder rifles hadn't been invented in the world. And you said we could, look to create more of an Eldritch Blast style weapon where it's like it is magical in nature and not mechanical. And I was a little on the fence about it. And then my sister told me that she was playing a half orc and didn't want me to play a half orc. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna scrap the character and start fresh.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but it was during that time that I was heavily looking into you're multi-classed for the people that are watching the stream. And so the title of this multi-class is Hexblade Knight.
Yeah, it's like Hexblade Paladin or something like that.
Yeah, so I think that's its subclass, like if it has a title. It's not necessarily like I think a D&D Beyond sanctioned naming convention, but
it's pretty common class to be pretty good. That was like Sorlock, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Paladin Warlock are pretty strong multi-classes. And initially, I wasn't going to do that. Initially, I came to you and said, hey, I'm going to play instead of a Paladin, it was a Warlock Rune Knight.
Yes.
Initially.
Right. And then I was down the tunnel of Hexblade.
Yeah, you're like, hey, like, that sounds very similar to this other class. And I started looking at it, and I was like, oh, mixing it with a Paladin instead, you do get more spell slots. And after that, I was like, I like that one a lot more.
Okay.
So you brought it upon yourself.
I know I did, and it's been great having Ben. For mechanics inside the campaign, Ben is often, I think, seen, and I think it comes from your natural ability to play. Also, having been a DM, it's probably similar when I'm on the other side of the table too, where when there's moments where the party seems confused, you're apt to just go, okay, I'm making a decision, here I'm go. Is that more of a Ben thing, or is that a Luke thing?
It's a little bit of both. It's definitely more of a Ben thing. I don't have a problem playing a background character. In campaign 1, I joined during the last 5 months of the campaign.
Yes.
And so I didn't want to play this invasive character that changed the group dichotomy or like the dynamic of everybody, and like start enforcing how like I played it. Everybody else, I want to play a very much background character that's just there to support. And so I picked this ranger character that had some cool ideas. Definitely wasn't like fleshed out super well, and overall I played a very passive role in the group, and by the end I was like, I like the character, I'm happy with where it went, but also I think I want to make my next character to be more involved, especially on the charisma side, is like get a higher charisma stat and actually feel like I'm engaging in the social scenarios. That last character was strictly just combat.
So I'm gonna go here. What's your thing with playing all humans?
So simple, so easy, man. It's like I said, I was gonna. So initially, I played a human. This is before they announced. Was it Tasha's Cauldron to Everything?
Yes.
I've always loved the variant human. I know it's powerful. You get a feat off the bat, but I feel like I've never done it to try and take like, oh, let me get the lucky feat at level 1. It's more like I want to get the alert feat and play this person who's all about like always alert, always aware, or like the dungeon delver of like, it's never been for me like a power thing, but more I feel that like a feat when you start the game with your character definitely makes your character feel a lot more fleshed out and the ideas about it, and it's good at what it's supposed to do right from the start of like, if I'm playing a thief who's all about picking locks, it feels crappy to just always fail your locks, and that'll happen when you roll low, but sometimes a feat goes a long way in like just giving it the push to be like, it's a niche thing, but that's what they're supposed to be good at. And so I played a lot of variant humans, and then but I was going to play a half orc. It's not that I'm against it. I know. And most of my next character ideas are not human.
And actually the one shot you didn't play human either.
Nope. The only reason I made Ben a human was because I was like, okay, if he's modeled after Obi-Wan, like, it's got to be human.
So. Now, so now we'll get back into some of the lore about Ben and get into asking you some questions more campaign specific for the player before we get into some stuff. So, you went over a broad background for Ben. So, let's look at not right before campaign session 0, but the childhood growing up, and particularly the relationship that you and Rad the Mad, developed at that early stage, and why that was important. So, real quick before getting that, Luke and Katie are actually brothers and sisters in real life, and so in the campaign they're half brother, sister, something.
Adoptive siblings.
Adoptive siblings. So that dynamic already works. But go ahead.
So again, I modeled this character after Obi-Wan, and I tried to carry those themes into his lore, his background, but make it make sense. And so Ben is an orphan. He carries no last name. He's just Ben. Same with I guess he's Kenobi, but they never talk about his family or anything like that for Obi-Wan. He just has his name and no family associated with it. And so Ben, who had no last name, has no family, grew up in an orphanage in Alara, had nothing, and his family became the brothers and sisters of that orphanage. And so in that sense, the orphanage is supposed to represent the Jedi Order and growing up as a youngling. And finding family in his companions.
Push her off.
She's good. Finding family in those companions. And so he grew up in an orphanage, a very basic life. And as he grew older, he wanted to do something with his life. He wanted to make himself noticed, and make himself feel like valued to the world. And especially like help make a living in a way that he can go back and help the other kids at the orphanage. And so when he turned 18 and aged out, he immediately went to like the Fighters Guild, the Knights, Paladins, anything like that. He's like, hey, I want to be a knight. And
there's a militia inside of Lara, so
they basically laughed him off as this scrawny kid, straight out of the orphanage, who had never held a sword in his life, and instead grew up fighting with sticks.
Yep.
And so he got nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
His first sword was a sword he carved himself
Yep.
out of a branch, and he went off into the woods and began training every single day, day in, day out. He would train in the woods using trees as targets,
Yeah.
And he would practice his forms and try and learn how to wield a sword, and progressively he would make the sword heavier and heavier with more wood. And during that time, he ran into a young half-orc girl. She was significantly younger than him. I can't remember what our age difference is. I think Ben is supposed to be 34, 36, and I think
Something like that.
Kirat is somewhere in the early 20s. So she would
Yeah.
have been, when he was 18, she was like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 12-year difference. And so she came from the forest, she lived in the forest, and she thrived in the forest, and so he never felt like he had to take care of her or like go find her food and stuff.
Right.
But she did latch onto him as
Yes.
like somebody
Hey, you're a person.
yeah, you're a person, you're treating me nicely, I'm just gonna hang out with you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just training, like I don't have a home, I don't do anything, like I can't help you.
Both
but,
misfits in the world.
yeah, she just kind of stuck by my side and kept following me around, and while I wasn't super for it, I wasn't against it. Had no issue. And he would pray, and he didn't like the church had God, like the churches had gods, but he was never, involved with it as a kid. And especially like living in the orphanage, he never left the orphanage, he never went to the churches, so he didn't really know the gods that well, and so he just prayed to whoever he could. And he spent most of his praying at night because he was training all through the day from sun up to sundown, and so it was before he'd go to bed, he'd pray every night, looking for power, looking for answers and a purpose in the world. And being the twilight hours of the day,
And what age do you think he felt his first divine touch to be warlock? I don't think that was ever previously.
Yeah, it would have been in the like 19 to 21 range. And yeah, that's when he kind of first started to get guidance from some sort of god, and these directly came from Twilight herself. And so he starts off as a paladin, in that he gets a little bit of knowledge and power, divine power, and that grants him the ability now to wield the sword better. And so at that point he goes back with the intention to join the militia, and on his way back he figures, hey, I'm gonna stop by the orphanage and say hi to the kids, all the people I grew up with. And so even though he's a couple years older, he still knows everybody that's in there. And when he goes back to the orphanage, he sees somebody he's never seen before, this woman who is helping the kids and seems to be spending time with them, and brought a bunch of toys that he had never seen in that orphanage before. And so he introduces himself to her, and she's gorgeous. And this is Ttrpg Kryze, who again, Star Wars character. And Ttrpg Kryze is the daughter of one of the dukes of the city. So she has some amount of powerful bloodline. And he talks to her about it, and they get on the topic. He grew up there, and eventually they fall in love, and he gets married. At this point, he had joined the militia too, as well, and had started receiving income, and actually had a job and a place to live. And over time, the family, wasn't super approving. They were looking for royalty to marry their daughter to. Satine and I did get married, and so now I've always seen the family as like, it's my job. I don't have a last name. I took her last name in the marriage. And so he's now Ben Kryze, and
working to honor
that's
that last name.
To honor the last name and bring do good deeds under that name, because he feels that he owes them a tremendous debt. Ever since he married, he's been looked on more favorably in the city. He's no longer an orphan kid who joined the militia because he had nothing else to do. He's now, hey, that's part of this family. And so he has this kind of weight on his shoulders that he has to carry himself in a certain manner.
So
and hold himself up to certain ideals.
speaking of the last name and the power of the last name, there's two things that come to mind within the campaign that seem present or come to mind and present for a lore session here. So one is the Hidden Hair Manor basically was able to start and operate because of your nobility. Even though you're orphaned, and now you have this last name, it still grants you certain stuff. Was that I know that was probably a forced upon mechanic by me as the DM, but did it fit well with what you're kind of...
I felt it definitely fit. He's definitely somebody who likes to think about strategy and weigh the pros and cons. And at the end of the day, the income that the Hidden Hair creates and the status that it creates within the city of just like, hey, we're tavern operators, grants us as a group a certain ability to operate and do our jobs with
discreetly.
Discreetly is like,
Bit
hey,
of a
where
Batcave.
are these guys getting their money from? If it's just like this group that every time they are seen in the city, they look richer and powerful, people are going to ask questions like, where the hell are they getting their money?
Yeah.
What are they doing? Versus this way, they're like, oh, they operate a pretty popular tavern and bar.
That's spreading.
They're
gotten Hammerfell.
They got their money. They're taking vacations. They're buying nicer clothes. They're looking cooler.
Yeah.
And so I think it was something that he probably would have in the moment said, hey, if we're going to do this, it's got to be done right. It's got to be by the books.
Right.
Like, the Kryze family isn't going to support
in particular,
shady bar that's full of thieves and murderers. This has got to be a above board popular place that definitely spreads that name or that power and provides to the family somehow in that sense.
Definitely. Well, and then so this leads up to the second question that I have here before we get back towards past stuff. How did he feel to the reaction of the destitute, parent-in-laws or the in-laws, his wife coming into town basically saying, the nobility is shattered, and then also knowing that you were able to start something like the Hidden Hair?
I think it would have been, he wouldn't have felt defeated, but he would have felt that he failed in a sense, that whole reason he left his wife and left the family was to go be a solution to the war. And say, hey, the Kryze family was a major part of ending this war and bringing peace back to the land. And so, his whole purpose is to find a solution to this war, not only to bring glory and like recognition to the family name, but also just to protect them.
Yeah.
And so he would definitely feel like he failed in a sense, that he there should have been more he could have done to help prevent this.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't make him feel insignificant in that matter, or like unthankful for the family in any way. Like,
right.
His pride for the family name doesn't come from their wealth or their nobility. It comes from having a family and having a name. And so his idea is somebody he grew up as just Ben.
Yeah,
he had no last name. He had no family name. Having a family name means he has a place that he belongs to.
Right. Right. Yeah. So session 0 comes along, and Kirad is armed to go with you. You're both given letters and said to meet in Darkfen. At this point, you've got, because you were talking about how he's about in mid-30s, so 15 years of, or 10 years of growth, and so you're starting as a level 3 for actually session 1. So to say at the very least that at this point in time in his life, he's a very skilled swordsman, and I think that's played through. Like, one of the commented things in one of our other lore sessions, interview sessions, was how hard you can hit with your two-handed sword when you when you max out the
Divine strikes
yes.
are powerful weapons.
Yes.
Yeah.
So starting session 0 at the beginning of the campaign, has it felt like Ben's tracking right with what you would think? Because would this be one of the most intense things that he's done?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the growth in his like the mechanical growth of getting levels in the game becoming more powerful has matched up with, I think, what he's experiencing as a character in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We start the game at level 3, and in that time he goes from essentially a commoner to a level 3 paladin warlock, and that takes him what would have that been, like 15 years?
Yeah.
From the age of like 19, 20 to 34, 36.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly in the last year he's gained those 7 levels, and that has to do with what he's experiencing as a person. An intense amount of praying and practice led him to get his first level in paladin, and he joins the militia, and after training and them realizing that, oh my god, there's this war that's going to be coming at some point, like it seems that this group, while there's no war yet, there's this group that is starting to militarize, and it's our job as a militia to also protect the city from other outside forces like monsters. We need to carry some amount of strategy. It's not just your skill in combat, but your ability to strategize on the battlefield.
Right.
And so then at that point, studying books of war, and not just becoming a warrior, but a scholar warrior. That's when he probably would have come across the Red Knight, and in those studies, he gains a first and second level of warlock. And so in that session 0, he was a level 1 paladin, level 2 warlock.
Yes.
And then that session starts, he gets into the midst of the war.
Yep.
And it's just battle after battle after battle, and he's really just like, he's having to pray to keep the strength to keep his friends alive, and to keep pushing forward. And so that leads him to gain more and more levels in paladin. He's reaching out to the powerful god that granted him the power in the first place, because he's so afraid of losing his friends and family. And he's starting to feel more comfortable in the situation, feel more powerful, to the point that he's like, hey, I have the strength to do this. I just need to start thinking about what I'm doing. And so he towards the end of the session, skipping ahead in the campaign, he's collected the books. He's met the Red Knight, and become one of her chosen champions, donning the red cape. A lot of the levels that he's going to be taking forward are warlock levels, to represent, as he's become powerful. Now he needs to learn how he can use his powers to start turning the tides of this war, because we are losing pretty badly.
Yes, so I try and keep this definitely under 40 minutes, so we're about to hit our 30-minute mark, so we'll get probably a part 2 with you as well at some point, but I have a few more questions to try and get through here. So first one that comes to mind, to follow up on that, is yes, there's been a lot of growth, and there's a lot to talk about in there, because we just didn't get to it tonight, but to kind of, for the viewers that have watched and kept up with our most recent session, so you've had this numb hand for the longest time.
Yeah.
And now you have an arm.
As a person, that annoyed me. I was like, there's no clues as to what I'm supposed to do with this. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I felt very defeated.
And now Ben has this entity that's basically chosen him, and you're left with that end of that session where your arm feels completely new, but it doesn't feel like yours. What are the thoughts going through Ben's head?
On one hand, there's the idea of like, he needs to be true to himself and to his family, and so he owes to him, he owes his body and life to his family. They took him in, they gave him a name. Their word and their name is the reason he is who he is now. Yeah. If he didn't have the Kryze name, he would have never been able to don paladin armor and be this representation that he is now. He would just be another militiaman. And so on one hand, he doesn't like the idea of giving up that to something else,
Right.
because he feels like he owes it somewhere. But he also understands that this is the entity that's going to guide him through to save his family, to save the continent from the war. And so it's a minuscule loss in the idea of it. Like there's a little bittersweet where he's like, hey, kind of sucks. Like this isn't. I wanna be the full embodiment of my family's name, but also I understand that I can't do this alone, and so I am willing to make those sacrifices and represent more than just my family if that's what it takes to end this conflict.
Absolutely. I'm excited to, as we continue to play, I mean, there's always something I'm throwing in mechanic-wise that's outside of D&D Beyond. I'm excited to continue because while this could seem like a major end of a hook, which it kind of is to some degree, we finally got you to the point where the 6 books are found and Red Knight and all that stuff, which was discussed way back a year ago.
I was going to say, this is something we planned from session 0 is the whole, when I was looking for my Warlock patron, like outside of game, or outside of the in-game and just me looking at mechanics, I was like, I don't know what my patron's going to be. I got to end up figuring that out. And at some point, I came across the item that was the Crimson Cape of the Red Knight, which I can't find on D&D Beyond anymore.
Yeah, I know.
I found it.
I found a page recently that was kind of...
And so I had to recreate it in the homebrew department. But I was like, it used to be in there because I used to have it on a copy character. Yeah. So I don't know why it disappeared from D&D Beyond, if it was a non-core thing. But
who knows?
Yeah, I found that cape, and I liked the thematically. It was it's a powerful item. Yeah. But also just thematically, I thought it was really cool. And so then I was like, well, who's the Red Knight? And so I looked it up, and it was like battle strategy, and I was like, that's it. That's the one.
That's the one.
So easy.
Kind of two more questions. Yeah. One is player or character related, and then one's player to end it. So, another question for Ben. Does Ben feel like he is going to be up to the task to contend with the forces that be?
I think he's... Right now, I think he's looking for wisdom on how to do it. And that's playing into the idea of he's now looking more at the Red God or the Red Knight more than Twilight herself. He feels powerful. He now is looking for wisdom on how to use that power and utilize it. And so while from a mechanical sense he will get stronger, in his mind he's like, I am powerful enough. I just need to know how to utilize it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think whether or not he survives it, he's willing to put his life on the line. In order to reach that goal. Yes.
Absolutely. Makes sense to me. And then for a player question, so we're talking... I don't know that we're full... I mean, I've had somebody in my campaign one that was, I think, a full power player that really tried to maximize everything, every little thing, and that just takes time. Now, I get that both you and I, when I look at Sal and I look at Ben, they're very mechanically driven, almost as you and I play similar, I think, where we're going to play to the strongest strengths that our character has, but obviously there's weaknesses too. So with that, in my campaign, DM to player, when you have so many powerful items that are already hitting at level 9 or level 10, wherever you guys are at, does the world still feel balanced, particularly when I'm doing a combat?
Yeah, I would say overall it feels balanced. I think it comes down to how to utilize it and how you're using your skills. I play a very stupidly powerful character, and it comes simply from the nature of a warlock paladin. Is an insanely strong build. You have a lot of skills and utilities. And for me, sometimes it comes down to how I'm taking my levels. Sometimes plays into is hey, I should take these levels. If I want to power play the character, I'm supposed to take these levels before these ones. But in my mind, how I see the character, I'm going to take these, and that's kind of how I've been trying to play it. Is it's naturally a very strong character. I mean,
yes,
plate mail, so starting AC is 19.
Yep.
He got a ring of protection. It went, or 18. It went, got a ring of protection. Went up to 19. 19's a hard armor class to hit. On top of that, he's doing a great sword with great weapon mastery as his feat. So you're gonna hit hard like a barbarian, and then now you're adding paladin divine strikes, which are just nuts. That it's a ton of damage. And so I think I'm playing a very strong character, and I definitely picked it because I wanted a character that was impactful. I felt like in the last campaign, the character was, not that it wasn't impactful, but it was less than I was looking for, and so it didn't feel as fun to play. Like I enjoyed the character that I made in campaign 1 and played.
Yeah.
But I definitely had this sense of lack in the whole campaign. I was like, man,
our cats are fighting, or my cats are fighting on the table, so it's distracting both of us.
I feel that like there were times that I'd get done with a session or a couple sessions, and I'd be like, man, I really hate my character. I feel like I'm not doing anything.
Right.
And I'd go into a fight, and it was just miss, take damage, miss, deal 6 damage when I hit. And I wanted something that felt more impactful, and after making it, I was like, this is definitely a little bit stronger than I was looking for or intending.
Right.
And there's ways that it can power creep more that I've been specifically trying to avoid. I think when I first looked at the class of Paladin Warlock multi-class, it was like, or Hexblade Paladin, they're like, okay, you're going to take, a level of Paladin, 2 level, and then like your next like 4 or 5 levels are Warlock, so then you can get Eldritch Smite and some other bonuses and stuff. And so I was like, I just want the ones where I can start wielding my weapons, where it's like, okay, I can wield a great sword, so I need 3 levels of Warlock. And then my first level of Paladin was so that way I could wear plate mail as heavy armor. And so there were some ideas that came back and forth, but it's like, taking Devil's Sight and Darkness and then casting Darkness on yourself so nobody can see but you can see is like stuff that is in the toolbox. I just don't really utilize because it doesn't feel fitting to the character.
You're not
so there's,
there, right?
Yeah, it's definitely it's a weird dichotomy of like playing a power character, not trying to be a power player.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I feel with like if we get to talking about Sal at some point, that's how I feel Sal can be too. I get that she's probably not striking as hard as some of the other characters, but there's different dynamics where it's like, okay, that could be a stupid rounds of combat. But
I'll be honest, I was never a fan of Paladins from the longest time.
Oh, really?
I did not know how Paladins worked until I played this character. I had never looked into it. Every time I looked at a Paladin, I was like, that looks too complicated. I'm not interested. I could understand every other class. Artificer was another one that I didn't really look into when it came out because I was like, it's just so complicated. I don't really want to know. And it wasn't until very recently that I was like, okay, I should learn this just so I understand it. It was last campaign where we had somebody playing an Artificer that I was like, what can an Artificer do that I'd look into it? And so that was the same with this Paladin. I just realized that, like, when charisma is your stat for spells, and it's your social stat, and then adding the Hexblade, which means that it's your attack stat too for your melee damage. It
maximizes on
the
roleplay and the combat.
Yeah, it maximizes on both ends, and it starts to go nutty really fast. And also, you're a really giving DM, and so somehow I have a charisma of 23, which is like the book that gives you +2 outside of the 20, and then like the stats from the house benefit that just like stack on top of whatever your charisma is having a +6 in your primary stat, that's your social, your spell casting, and your melee weapon, is a very, very intense.
That's why I'm having these conversations to make sure my campaign stays balanced.
Yeah.
So
there are times I don't feel very balanced.
Right.
And
but I took you down last combat.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. I feel like it's very easy to just like, I'm just going to throw a character that can take you down. But also the difficulty, like for me as a DM, is like I've had games where I've had power players who like specifically create a maximized character and try and play them maximized too, to like every end. And then other players who it's their first time and they're playing a Beastmaster Ranger
Super.
because they wanted a bear as a pet, and
Right.
they really wanted just a cuddly
Wacky-
bear, and they don't know anything
The
about
wacky
it.
players, yeah.
Yeah,
Versus
and the biggest struggle is always combat, because it's like I need monsters that can hit that person and can take hits from that person, but also I can't be one-shotting all my other players because they're not going to have fun.
My favorite thing has been, and I think you're starting to pick up on this, has been hordes.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be doesn't have to be big. And this is a DM tip for everybody else out there. You know, something like you told me. I'm a little bit more of an internet DM where I see something, I'm like, ooh, I might incorporate that into my stuff. So I saw something about hordes, and I'm like, this is a great. I can just drop 20 goblins. Oh, and you think that's all of them? Oh, wait, here come more.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it's like pack tactics, which is an ability you see on the some of the easiest creatures in the game, like kobolds and wolves.
Right. Yes.
Is one of the strongest abilities in the game.
Yeah.
It's like 10 kobolds can take down the right part, like a party of like level 5s and 6s if you just roll right, because you're getting advantage. And it's like they're like one of the most powerful creatures in the game. Is a challenge rating like 5, and it comes all the way back from the Tomb of Annihilation. I'm obsessed with that one shot from the first edition. The whole story around it I think is crazy funny. It's just like the creator Gary Gygax was like, like I'm sick of power players, they ruin the game for me, so I'm gonna create this dungeon that's unfair. And he creates this whole dungeon, and in the middle of it he's like, I'm gonna throw one monster in here, and I want them to bring their strongest level 20 characters, and it's like a banshee. I think it's a banshee, not a specter. And it's like, it's one ability. It's like, make a charisma saving throw. If you roll lower than a 16, you're instantly dead.
Ha!
And it's a challenge 5. Like, it's like a challenge 5 creature. It's you look at it in the monster book and you're like, just another ghost. Skip past it. It's like, no, this can kill level 20s.
Right.
Yeah,
Totally.
Everybody drops to 0.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I did that. I had something that took down Ritz like full health, dropped him down to 0 point at one point, but I don't think it was Banshee. Anyhow, so we officially hit our 40, and so we're gonna wrap this up, which means there will be part 2, because Ben and Luke have a lot more to discuss, because we didn't even get into his problem with traps. We didn't even get into his love-hate relationship with his eyelidded sword. And then we didn't. There's a lot of part 1 of campaign 2 that we didn't get to discuss, nor did we just get to discuss relationships with other characters in the game. So this is just kind of casually like we'll get to a second part 2. But anyhow, thank you for stopping in tonight. I know we're Oh, actually, it's not Thursday. So we're not competing with Critical Role anyhow. But if you watch us on the back end, especially through YouTube, and you like our content, I'm going to start trying to remind myself to say, go ahead and subscribe, and we're pretty much on every platform, except I'm really behind on the podcasting side of stuff. So eventually I'll get back to updating that. But anyhow, you guys have a good rest of your night, and thank you, Luke, for taking the time.
You.